Before we start, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. Maybe you're carrying wisdom from someone who's no longer with you. Maybe you're searching for guidance that feels deeper than what the modern world offers. Maybe you remember a grandparent who seemed to know something about life that you're only beginning to understand now. This conversation is going to be deeply personal. I'm going to tell you about a prayer my grandmother taught me when I was 7 years old. A prayer I forgot for decades, dismissed as childhood superstition, and then rediscovered during the darkest period of my adult life. A prayer that has become the foundation for every major decision I've made since. Most people know me for building companies and launching rockets. But what they don't know is that behind every impossible project, every moment when I had to choose between the safe path and the uncertain one, there's been a simple prayer whispered by a woman who never learned to read but understood something profound about how the universe works. Today I want to share that prayer with you. Not because I think everyone should pray the same words, but because I think the wisdom embedded in those words might be exactly what our complex, anxious, achievement-obsessed world needs to hear. By the end of this conversation, you might understand why the simplest truths are often the most powerful ones, why ancient wisdom can guide modern decisions, and why the voice of someone who loved you unconditionally might be the most important voice you'll ever hear. I was 7 years old, staying at my grandmother's small house in Pretoria. This was 1978, and Grandma Cora was already in her 70s, a woman who had lived through world wars, economic collapses, personal tragedies that would have broken most people. But when I think of her, I don't remember someone marked by hardship. I remember someone marked by peace. She had this routine every night. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and put away, she would sit in her old wooden chair by the window and pray. Not loud, dramatic prayers, but quiet conversations with what she simply called the Almighty. I was a curious kid, always asking questions about everything. One night I asked her what she was saying during those quiet moments. "I'm asking for guidance, child," she said in that soft voice that somehow carried more authority than any CEO I've ever met. "I'm asking to be shown the right path." "What if God doesn't answer?" I asked with the brutal honesty that only children possess. She smiled. Not the kind of smile that dismisses a question, but the kind that welcomes it. "Oh, he always answers, Elon, but sometimes we're too busy talking to listen." That night, she taught me the prayer that would eventually become the most important thing anyone ever gave me. "Dear God," she said, and I repeated after her, "help me to see what you see, to love what you love, and to do what you would have me do. Give me the courage to follow where you lead, even when I can't see the whole path. And help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. Amen." 26 words. I've probably spoken them 10,000 times since that night, though it took me 30 years to understand what they really meant. At 7, I thought it was just something nice we said before bed. I had no idea that this simple prayer contained everything I would need to navigate the most challenging decisions of my life. For years after that summer, I didn't think much about Grandma May's prayer. I was busy being a kid, then a teenager, then a young adult convinced that intelligence and effort were all you needed to solve any problem. I went to university, started companies, made money, achieved what looked like success by every conventional measure. But there was always something missing, a sense of direction that went deeper than quarterly targets or market opportunities. I remember the night I rediscovered the prayer. It was December 2008. Tesla was weeks away from bankruptcy. SpaceX had failed 3 rocket launches in a row. I had spent my entire PayPal fortune and was facing the possibility that everything I had worked for was going to collapse. I was sitting in my office at 2 a.m., surrounded by financial projections that all pointed to failure, when I heard Grandma Cora's voice as clearly as if she were sitting next to me. "Help me to see what you see." The memory came flooding back. That little house in Pretoria, the wooden chair by the window, the quiet certainty in her voice when she talked about guidance and trust. I found myself speaking words I hadn't said in decades. "Dear God, help me to see what you see, to love what you love, and to do what you would have me do." Something shifted in that moment. Not my circumstances, Tesla was still almost bankrupt, SpaceX was still failing, but my perspective changed. Instead of seeing only the immediate crisis, I began to see a larger pattern. What if this wasn't just about saving companies? What if this was about proving that sustainable transport was possible, that private space exploration could work, that a small team with the right mission could outcompete massive incumbents? Give me the courage to follow where you lead, even when I can't see the whole path. That line hit me like lightning. I'd been trying to see the whole path, to have guarantees about outcomes before I committed to a direction. But Grandma May's prayer was about following guidance step by step, even when the destination wasn't clear. The next morning, instead of trying to solve everything at once, I focused on the next right step. For Tesla, that meant one more attempt to secure emergency funding. For SpaceX, that meant preparing for one final launch with everything we had learned from our failures. And help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. This was the hardest part. I had always believed that success came from imposing my will on circumstances, from forcing outcomes through intelligence and effort. But the prayer was asking me to hold my plans lightly, to remain open to possibilities I hadn't imagined. Within 6 months, both companies had turned around. Not because I had figured everything out, but because I had learned to combine intense effort with genuine surrender to something larger than my own understanding. That prayer became my daily practice, not just in times of crisis, but as a way of approaching every significant decision. When people ask me how I decide which projects to pursue, which risks to take, which opportunities to decline, they expect me to talk about market analysis or technological feasibility. But the truth is, I start with Grandma Cora's prayer, help me to see what you see. This isn't about receiving mystical visions. It's about getting my ego out of the way long enough to perceive what's actually needed in the world, not just what would be profitable or impressive. When I look at the climate crisis, I see the need for sustainable transport. When I look at humanity's long-term survival, I see the need for multiplanetary capability. When I look at the risks of artificial intelligence, I see the need for brain-computer interfaces that keep humans relevant. These aren't business opportunities I calculated. They're needs I perceived when I learned to see beyond my own immediate interests. To love what you love. This line teaches me to align my passions with what serves life rather than what serves my ego. I've learned to love problems that matter, not just problems I can solve easily. I've learned to love challenges that push the boundaries of what's possible, not just challenges that guarantee success. When you love what serves life, work stops feeling like work. The 18-hour days, the constant pressure, the public criticism, all of it becomes secondary to the joy of participating in something meaningful and to do what you would have me do. This is about action guided by wisdom rather than ambition. Not every good idea is yours to pursue. Not every problem is yours to solve. The prayer helps me distinguish between what I'm capable of doing and what I'm called to do. I could have stayed at PayPal and become incredibly wealthy doing online payments. I could have invested in real estate or hedge funds and lived comfortably. But when I prayed that prayer, honestly, electric cars and rockets to Mars were what I felt called to pursue, even though they seemed impossible. Give me the courage to follow where you lead, even when I can't see the whole path. This might be the most practical line in the entire prayer. Every significant achievement requires you to take steps before you can see the staircase. You have to start manufacturing cars before you know how to manufacture them profitably. You have to attempt rocket launches before you know how to land them successfully. The prayer doesn't ask for certainty about outcomes. It asks for courage to take the next step based on the guidance you've received so far. And help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. This is the foundation of everything else. It's not about being passive or fatalistic. It's about recognizing that your limited perspective might miss possibilities that become visible as you move forward. I wanted Tesla to be profitable within 2 years. God's plan involved nearly a decade of struggle that built capabilities we never could have developed otherwise. I wanted SpaceX to reach orbit quickly and cheaply. God's plan involved failures that taught us lessons no amount of theoretical knowledge could have provided. The results were better than anything I could have planned, but they required me to trust the process even when I couldn't see where it was leading. I've watched this prayer work in areas far beyond business. When my personal life was falling apart, when relationships were failing, when I felt disconnected from everything that mattered, the prayer always brought me back to center. Help me to see what you see in this relationship, in this conflict, in this disappointment. Often, I would see my own contributions to problems I had been blaming on others. I would see opportunities for growth hidden inside apparent failures, to love what you love in this person, in this situation, in this challenge. Love became a choice rather than a feeling, a commitment to seeking the good in circumstances that felt entirely negative. And to do what you would have me do, not what my hurt feelings wanted me to do, not what my pride demanded, but what would actually heal and help and move things forward. Give me the courage, because the right action is often the hardest action, the most vulnerable choice, the response that requires you to be bigger than your current emotional state. Even when I can't see the whole path, because healing doesn't come with a timeline, because growth doesn't follow a predictable pattern, because trust is only meaningful when the outcome is uncertain. And help me to trust that your plan is better than mine, perhaps the most difficult prayer in the context of broken relationships and personal pain, but also the most liberating. It releases you from the burden of controlling outcomes and allows you to focus on your part of the process. Every morning now, before I check my phone or look at my schedule or dive into the urgent demands of the day, I repeat Grandma Cora's prayer. It takes 30 seconds. But those 30 seconds shape everything that follows. The prayer reminds me that I'm not just building companies, I'm participating in something larger. I'm not just solving problems, I'm serving purposes that go beyond my own interests. I'm not just making decisions, I'm following guidance from a source of wisdom that sees more than I can see. This doesn't make me passive or less strategic. If anything, it makes me more decisive, because I'm not paralyzed by the need to calculate every possible outcome before acting. I can commit fully to the direction I'm given, knowing that course corrections will come as needed. People sometimes ask me how I maintain optimism in the face of seemingly impossible challenges. The answer is in that prayer. When you believe that the intelligence behind the universe is guiding your steps, even failures become data rather than disasters. Even setbacks become setups for breakthroughs you couldn't have imagined. I think about Grandma Cora often. She died when I was 12, too young to appreciate what she had given me. She never saw Tesla or SpaceX or any of the projects that have defined my adult life. But in a very real sense, she made all of them possible. Not because she funded them or connected me with the right people or taught me technical skills, because she taught me how to listen for guidance that goes deeper than my own understanding. She taught me how to align my will with something larger than my ego. She taught me how to trust a process even when I couldn't see the destination. That 26-word prayer contains everything I've learned about leadership, decision-making, risk-taking, and meaning. It's the foundation beneath every foundation, the strategy behind every strategy. Dear God, help me to see what you see, to love what you love, and to do what you would have me do. Give me the courage to follow where you lead, even when I can't see the whole path. And help me to trust that your plan is better than mine. Amen. You don't have to believe in my grandmother's God to benefit from her wisdom. You don't have to pray these exact words to access the principles they contain. But I would encourage you to consider the possibility that there's guidance available to you that goes beyond your own analysis, your own experience, your own understanding, that there might be a perspective larger than your current viewpoint, a love deeper than your current capacity, a plan more comprehensive than your current strategy. The world tells you to trust yourself, to follow your passion, to make your own way. But sometimes the most radical thing you can do is ask to be shown a way that's better than the one you would choose for yourself. Sometimes the most sophisticated strategy is the simplest prayer. Sometimes the voice of a grandmother who never learned to read contains more wisdom than all the experts and advisors and thought leaders combined. Sometimes 26 words whispered by someone who loved you unconditionally can guide you better than thousands of pages of business theory and self-help advice. If you had a grandmother like mine, remember what she taught you. If you didn't, consider borrowing her prayer until you find your own. If prayer feels foreign to you, think of it as asking for guidance from whatever source of wisdom you trust most. The challenges you're facing right now, the decisions that keep you awake at night, the direction you need to choose for your life, maybe what you need isn't more information or more options or more time to analyze. Maybe what you need is the courage to ask for guidance and the wisdom to trust what you receive. Maybe what you need is to remember that you're not navigating this alone. Maybe what you need is a prayer that connects you to something larger than your own understanding. I carry my grandmother with me every day in those 26 words. Her faith, her peace, her certainty, that guidance is always available to those humble enough to ask for it. That prayer has guided me through business crises and personal failures, through moments of doubt and seasons of growth, through decisions that seemed impossible and outcomes that seem miraculous. It can guide you too. Share this with someone who needs to remember that they're not alone in their decisions. Subscribe if these conversations help you think differently about guidance and wisdom and the voices that shaped you. And remember, the most important lessons often come from the simplest sources. Sometimes a grandmother's prayer contains everything you need to build the life you're meant to live. The guidance is there. The question is whether you're humble enough to ask for it and brave enough to follow where it leads.